beginning. If we could begin with introductions, Marianne McKee, School Board.
Matt Fetterson,
Denise Brooks, School Board.
Andy Block, School Board.
Ed Tate, School Board.
Mark Violet, School Board.
Jerry Grubb, School Board.
Jason Truskevich, Assistant Principal, North.
Danielle Jordan, Principal of Richmond Elementary.
Tim Long, Principal of East Middle School. Joe McClay, Principal of Holland Elementary School.
Barry Desko, Director, K-12 Education.
And Sue Elliott, Assistant Superintendent.
Thank you all. 2 items on the agenda tonight. We're going to begin with the proposed district calendar. We'll receive some comments from Mr. Desko, and then I'd like first to ask if the board has any questions or concerns. We'll entertain board discussion first and then open it to the public. Mr. Desko.
So in December, we had, at Academic Standards, had spent some time looking at the proposed calendar for next year. And we had that draft calendar on the board agenda in January to vote on that. And it was at your request that we would delay that, have some additional conversation about possible changes to the calendar. So I don't know that there is necessarily a need to explain what we've already done both publicly as well as at the Academic Standards meeting, but rather to answer any questions you have or listen to any input you have so that we can put together a calendar to bring before the board again for approval.
Questions, comments from the board? Mr. Desko, would you take a moment, please, to talk about the thinking behind having schools closed without students on election day?
Well, we were always closed without students in the primary election day in November. We added, I think it was 2 years ago, the primary day, and the reason for that was kind of multi-purpose. One is it was difficult to accommodate voters and have students in school. There was a security concern with that, as well as the disruption and the difficulty sometimes in providing reasonable space for the voters to come in. I think we had been able to accommodate that better in the past because your primary elections are usually a lower turnout. But again, with security and some of the other concerns that were raised, it was thought that we best served to take that out of the calendar as a student day. And of course, we took it out as a staff day also because we needed, I mean, we have a set number of student and staff days that we need to meet. So we needed to end that day for teachers also. I do want to say to you, I'll just give you some general thoughts about the calendar because maybe it'll be helpful for the conversation. And this isn't to support or not support any additional days off during the calendar. I think that's really the dilemma that you will face. I think what the board will need to wrestle with is how many days you can feel comfortable building into the school calendar, recognizing that right now we have a start date that could be as late as September 5th, and with the right combination of days off and snow days. So if I looked at this particular calendar and started it on September 5th, added an additional day to a day off within this calendar, and added the 3 snow days that we experienced already this year, we would have our last student day the last week of June. We're in the last week of June, and that Monday, and then the teacher day, obviously after that. So the only thing that I think you need to think about a little bit is if we are going to add days, do we need to also consider taking some days away? Do we also need to consider a pre-Labor Day start to make up for building additional days into the calendar? I also want to just give you a little bit of background because I know it was mentioned by the young man that spoke at the board meeting that talked about it possibly being an early dismissal day. I don't know if the public knows or if many folks recognize that it's not only a 180-day student calendar requirement that the state has, but we also have set number of hours that we must have within our school system, both at the elementary and the middle and high school level. So we have to build not only a number of days, but have the correct number of hours. So if we have an early dismissal, we need to subtract hours out of our school day. And Mr. Truskevich is here, and he works with me on this as we look at hours. But you know, different grade levels have a different number of hours. As an example, you know, when we start school with the opening day of school with just 9th graders in, 10th, 11th, 12th graders don't get those hours. We have NBIT students whose hours need to be adjusted when we have early dismissal days built into our calendar. Those hours come down off of the required hours. So I just want to remind you that it's not just a number of days that we need to meet, but we also need to meet a number of hours.
Can you help me with, when we look at and some of this is preface of the conversation, right, to stay with that. With the exception, there are a few calendar days that are tied to what would be religious holidays. In general, they are coordination with Christmas, coordination with Easter, Passover, Rosh Hashanah. Are there any other? We don't do Good Friday.
Yom Kippur.
Okay.
We don't do Passover.
Sorry, I said the wrong one.
Yeah.
You're right. Sorry, Passover, you're right. I'm new. Okay, you're right, sorry. So I got that wrong. And then the other question, let's take a moment here, which was, on those days, with the exception of Christmas, where I know all the schools, all the buildings are closed. Of those other three, the 2 Jewish holidays and Easter period, are any of those times when staff is working, aside from the 261, the full year of staff? Is there any of that staff is in the building, or they're doing Act 48, or they're doing anything like that at that time?
On those dates that
Any
you
of
mentioned.
the Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, and Easter break?
Well, Easter, there are 2 days built in as professional exchange days. So that week, the first 2 days of that spring break, Monday and Tuesday, are professional exchange days in the contract.
Okay.
So they would be the only 2.
Can you show me the other days in the calendar where schools are closed and the professional staff is present?
Sure. So on this calendar, let's start in August. So the first 3 days that we open school with staff this coming year would be August 28, 29, and 30, our professional days. No students, but we have staff. I think you now need to, and I'm not going to talk about early dismissal days, right? Because we know students and staff are in and students depart early, so.
Well, let's go first through the schools are closed and staff is.
Okay, so then in November, 21st of November is a day without students.
And just so I know the context of that historically is the 2 days, the 19th and 20th, are typically half days.
They are conference days for K through 8.
Full conference days, or
No,
are they half day for students? That's what.
Monday and Tuesday are half days, early
Right.
dismissal. Wednesday is a full day off for all. The election day, the 6th, is a professional development day in November. When you scroll down to the 15th of February, that is a professional development day. No students, but we have staff in. We already mentioned the 2 days in spring break. Monday, Tuesday are professional exchange days. So most staff exchange that time out, but there are some staff that come in, relatively small number. And then the last teacher day in June, the 17th for next year. So those are all professional days for staff and not for students.
I only asked the question because I'm trying to figure out if that was if there was flexibility there of moving that sort of day.
They'll just want to put those are days where the staff's in where we couldn't bring kids in because they've got other things to do that are part of their agreement.
There are professional development days, yes, and most of those, if not all, I'd have to look, are defined contractually about providing those.
Let me be clear, they're defined about providing the days, but they're not defined, if I'm correct, about providing when they're provided. They're provided within.
Days within the calendar.
Yeah, exactly. If you wanted to, you could have them all in 1 week. It would be silly, but you could have them all in 1 week, but that's not, okay. So I'm not voicing an opinion. I think you understand my thought process, just trying to put on the table what might be malleable or
The
possible.
first day of school, Mary, is Tuesday after Labor Day.
Correct. So next year it is the 4th, yes.
So I'd like to ask about election day. If I'm remembering right, we're always closed on general election day, right? And last year, was it? We decided to close on the primary.
I think last year was the second year, yes.
2 years ago. And you cited some logistics or operational issues, but you also cited security. So if I'm remembering correctly, that was something I did not support at the time that we voted for the calendar. But I'm wondering if that's a day that we could easily capture back, primary election day. For all of the years, we had that as an in-school day. I remember it was a positive experience when I was in Council Rock that we would visit, particularly Newtown Middle School. We would walk up and we would have an education about voting and often meet your parents there, things like that. So, I think it's a real miss that we're closing the school for that. And I really feel, listen, we have to be concerned about security, but I think the security on election day is kind of unfounded. We have a lot of volunteers there. We, of course, have voters there. And these folks are patriots coming out to do their duty. And the kids should see that, in my opinion.
And that we should be able to put that back easily, right? Because I remember before we voted to close the Robertson, said, because we captured the snow day, we need to, we got a bunch of crazy snow days, we can pull that out anytime we want.
So could that become a student day? You're asking a student and a staff day. The answer is, of course, we can do that with any of these days.
But that seems like an easy, for me, it seems like a no-brainer. It's an easy, right? For all these years in Council Rock, we didn't have it until 2 years ago for what I believe are often, mostly unfounded reasons. And, we can accommodate some other days that might be a better fit.
Barry, was that day after the election day?
In the spring? The primary
Back when we
election?
did it, we didn't yet, spring. I thought it was a half day, so I remember the kids going out half day.
It may have been at times, but I mean, it's not in the last 2 years. It's a day off.
No, we gave them a day off, but
Right.
before that, it was a half day, wasn't it?
It may have been. We've always had some spring early dismissal days
So
for students.
let me ask you this, if we decided to put that day back in the calendar, would you go back and take a look to see whether you wanted it to be a whole day or a half day?
My concern with having another early dismissal day becomes the hours. We are real close at a number of our grade levels with meeting the state minimum hours based on our
So you want it to
calendar.
be a full day?
I think it's safer for us to have it that way.
Well, I've been thinking about half days as well lately, and it seems to me that it's a real disservice, particularly at the secondary level, where a kid's got English at the end of the day. The kid loses English, but the kid doesn't lose math if it's in the morning. I'm not a fan of half days.
Yeah, we've spoken with that at the high school. That's a struggle to try to, you're right. I mean, they end up getting their first 3 periods in and lose the rest of it. The middle schools, because they rotate, are a little bit easier. Elementary schools can adapt and adjust what a teacher's doing, but the high school makes it very difficult.
Yeah.
Any other comments?
Actually, the reason I asked for the table of motion is because we made a commitment to have a discussion. I'd almost, before discussing any further, because I do have some questions I might want to ask, but I'd almost like to hear from the public first, hear what they have to say, and then, maybe come back to the discussion. That's okay.
So would anyone wish to speak?
The way we normally do that, because the microphone's up here, so if you're going to speak, you can come sit down, introduce yourself.
Good evening, everyone. Today, my name is Veer Sahu. I'm a junior at Council Rock North. I'd like to start by thanking you all for allowing me to speak with you today. I'd also like to thank the board for delaying the motion to approve the school calendar until we had a chance to speak today about adopting Diwali as an official school holiday on the school calendar. I just want to point out some highlights about what our school district will gain by passing this initiative. This will show that our district officially recognizes diversity and is taking concrete steps towards inclusiveness. There are a few other school districts in our region which recognize Diwali, but we would still be at the forefront. It lets others in our community, county, state, and nation that know that we do not only excel in education, but we are taking the lead in being inclusive at a time of divisiveness. This act will garner media attention and show our district in a positive light. I would also like to think that college admissions committees would generally look more favorably towards student applicants who come from districts known to foster tolerance and inclusiveness. This initiative lets us, your student leaders, know that our voices are being heard by those in power and that we can be a voice for change. As I mentioned previously, I and other supporters are well aware of the constraints on the school system in terms of days off, especially this late in the school year, which is why I believe that having Wednesday, November 7th, 2018, as a half day of school for Diwali would serve as a starting point and would be a reasonable compromise for this year without changing the school calendar in any significant way. During 2019 and 2020, Diwali falls on weekends, so although it should still be recognized by the school district, those days off from school will be needed. In 2021, Diwali should be acknowledged as a full holiday, as other religious holidays are, which I'm sure the board will be able to accomplish with proper planning. I hope that you will see that there is much for the school district to gain with this initiative, and I sincerely hope that you will recommend this proposal to the board. I would be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
First off, let me just congratulate you on being solution-oriented
Thank you.
rather than just asking for something. Having an opinion, that's a big deal in this world to come with solutions.
Thank you.
So that's off to you.
I'm going to be, help me to understand how the holiday is celebrated.
Sure.
And not to be, some holidays are time with families, some holidays are time in services. Help me to understand how Diwali is
Sure. So
celebrated.
Diwali is actually the festival of lights celebrated by Hindus, Buddhists, and Sikhs around the world. Typically in India, the celebration actually lasts a week, but in America, we obviously can't do that. So we celebrate on the last day. On this day, we go to the temple where we pray to our gods. And then in the evening, we'll have a celebration with friends, families, and we dance, party, dress up in traditional clothes, eat traditional food, exchange gifts, and just have a great time.
So just the structure you've given, so for the next year, the 7th is the last day.
Right.
And so this would allow you, the people who are celebrating this holiday, to do the latter portion, which you spoke
Exactly.
about, whether you go to services or whether
Right.
you, at the end of the day, celebrate with the
Exactly.
family. Just trying to understand
Yeah,
the structure.
So I'm assuming that, I'm sorry, I don't have a question for you. I was just-
Okay.
You did a great job.
Thanks.
Really impressive. I'm assuming that if, once we institute it, it's very hard to undo it. So although the holiday may fall on a Saturday or Sunday the following year, we're still going to have to recognize that on the calendar, right? But that makes no sense. I'm assuming, right? Am I wrong? Looking for.
You mean with another
Looking
day?
for somebody
You mean with a
who would
Friday?
say something.
You mean a
Yes.
Friday or
No, I don't think, we don't do that currently with the Jewish holidays.
Okay.
So that's just one, that's a day earlier we would end the school year on those days when we don't have to build it.
I see.
Calendar.
It's a day constrained, but not identified as a religious holiday.
All right.
It's
And
a
then-
day constrained by practice.
So then we just have to count on the superintendent and the administration to remember, put it on the calendar the following year. It does immediately follow general election day in 2018. So you would have 2 days.
We're still in public comment. So we're-
I'm sorry.
I'm waiting, there may be more
Next
questions.
Is there any other questions?
Oh, great.
Denise has a question.
So I don't know a lot about this. In the Jewish calendar, our holidays don't follow the American calendar. So our holidays can range between, like Rosh Hashanah can be from early in September or into October. How does the calendar work?
Yep, similarly, it's based on the lunar calendar, actually.
Right,
So
it's-
it's usually end of October or early November is usually where the dates will land.
So just, it could fall on Halloween.
It could, yeah.
Just from a planning perspective, anybody happen to know? Because the Jewish calendar is also a lunar calendar.
Right.
So, and it goes, and Ramadan for those people, so it's all, Muslims also follow the lunar calendar. You don't really know if there's a relationship in terms of how many days after what, there's any correlation that Yom Kippur is this and that's that other.
Lunar calendar, it probably is.
I don't know,
The
because they
Jewish
could
holidays
go,
are following lunar calendar.
I know, but we throw a leap month in every couple of
That is
years.
true.
It screws everything up, okay? So I just didn't know, because it would help from a planning perspective, because we would know that, that this holiday is a Wednesday, that means that the other one always falls. That's, I was just trying to figure that out. No, I don't think we can correlate, because Jews throw the leap month in, which screws everything up. Trying to figure it out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comment?
Good evening.
Yeah, Dr. Sahu, I'm Veer's father. I've addressed the board before, and I do have to thank you all for spending time and listening to this and really taking it seriously. And I think that shows a lot of effort on the board's part to not brush off students and say, you know what, it's just kids, and yeah, we listen to them, and that's it. But just the fact that I think you folks have tabled a motion at a board meeting on a calendar, I think is a very, very significant step in saying that, you know what, we'll open it to discussion and really have an active discussion. And what I've heard already, I think it just tells, I think, all of us that you've taken this seriously. And I'm hoping that you'll act on it. I've served on committees and boards over the last couple of decades, and unfortunately, boards don't get a whole lot of credit or positive credit. I think it's a lot easier to blame and say, something happened negatively and blame the board. And I think this initiative that these students have really put together on their own with very little input from parents, I think these guys really took to heart what the principals had told them to do, and they went with it. And they came up with something that is really going to show inclusiveness in our community. Now, what they're talking about, yes, I think we all understand serves a smaller segment of the community, but that community is growing. There are other school districts that do celebrate this, so we wouldn't be at the top, but I think we'd still be at the front. This is going to happen probably more in other communities around the country. So I think the question we need to ask is, are we going to be at the forefront? Are we going to take the lead? Or are we going to at the end sort of say, you know what, others are doing it, so I guess we got to do it and follow along? And I think being in a metro area where we do have a diverse community, we have a lot of people coming in and out of our community, I think it's a very, very positive step to say that, you know what, we're going to be positive about this. There's a segment of our community that wants it. The supporters actually are, most of them, if you start the petition, are not Hindus. Most of the people, a lot of them who signed it are saying, you know what, it's a sign that we want to show fairness. We want to show that we are open in our community. We are diverse already, whether others may say or not say that. And this is the right step to do. So I think if we're going to say that in the institution, we're going to be recognizing and acknowledging certain faiths, and part of our community says, you know what, I think we should have the same thing. I think it really is important to say that, you know what, we're going to acknowledge that portion as well. The board, as I said, don't often get a whole lot of credit, but I think this is one thing that it's hard perhaps to see it right now, but I think in the future, I think this is something that's going to be very, very positive. And I think it's going to reflect very positively on our board and our school district to say, you know what, we did this before most other people didn't do it because we thought about it, we thought about the future, we planned ahead. And I think it's going to be something that's really going to be held in higher regard over time. I think not necessarily even today. Today it'll be a smaller number, but I think over time it's going to tell. So I really do appreciate, I think, the effort that you're making in really having a good discussion about this and trying to really come up with a solution. And as he said, and some of his other colleagues and leaders of student leaders have come up, saying, this is at least a partial solution. And I think in the next 3 years, when it does come up, hopefully the board will look into that and say, you know what, we can adopt this. I'd be happy to answer any other questions that you may have.
I had another question. I don't know if you would know the guy looking well at our folks. I'm feeling like it's the right thing to do. I'm feeling somebody pushed for having election day off. And remembering the debate with Mark, I'm feeling that that's a better solution, swapping those days than going with the half day. I guess my question would be around if this was the holiday we were going to recognize. Do we know what percentages of students and or population in our area would observe that holiday versus anything else?
May I answer that?
Yeah,
I think it's going to be very difficult. I think we all can understand it's going to be a smaller number than what you may be used to with other religious holidays. I think we already know that. That number, however, is growing as well. The second thing is that many of the students still come to school. So my son came to school this year, and because he's saying, well, I'm in high school, I don't want to miss a day because I still am responsible for all the work and the homework. What's the point? I might as well go to school. The teacher's there. I can learn everything.
No, that part I get. So, my question is around, I'm looking to, I guess, consider the inclusiveness piece in a bigger way.
Sure.
Say, are there any other groups that are out there that that we need to consider, and again, not instead of, and then to your point, taking anything away to add something, but, you know, as we recognize, I know there's school districts that are all over New Jersey because of the population.
Actually, there's one even in Pennsylvania, I didn't know, I think he searched and there's one, was it Union Transport, I think, I'm not talking, but I think there's another one that does it, and you're right, I think this is something that the board is going to have to grapple with in the future, where other groups may say, we want this, or we want that.
Andy, I think one of the interesting quote I heard, which kind of comes in apropos, was a discussion about the difference between a democracy and a republic. And if you have two wolves and a lamb discussing what they're going to have for dinner, in a democracy, the lamb's in trouble. In a republic, the lamb's got a chance. Okay, so I guess that speaks to, you know, do you work by majority or do you work by a different guiding principle? My challenge around this is, what does MBIT do now? Because we are partnered with MBIT, so we would need to have some level of coordination with MBIT. Do they give the day off or not? Because then that's one thing. The other thing, from my perspective, you know, I grew up on the other end of the state. Here there are 3 days of Jewish religious holidays. At the other end of the state, one of those holidays is only celebrated 1 day. And so I grew up with it, where I took the other day off. And I'm not saying one way or the other yet on what this is, but I think to Andy's question, I remember a couple years ago we had a football player. Ramadan came at a lousy time for him. It was August, and he was in full practice, which meant he was actually in danger because he was on hot days. He was not taking anything by mouth, neither water nor food, until after sundown. That was dangerous for him, but that's his choice. My point, I digress a little bit. My point would be, in a multicultural environment, I think one of the first things we can do, and probably should do at some level, is give direction to staff about, even when we don't give holidays off, when we don't go holiday off, of what should staff not do on those days. At Penn State, I had a guy gave, you know, midterm on or, you know, some large test on Yom Kippur, and his answer was, if you don't take it, you'll have to come in another time at my convenience. Well, that wasn't the right way to run it either. So minimally, for many holidays, it's a multicultural environment, we need to look to what those involve and give direction. I don't know, but give direction to staff that says, these are times you should not be doing things. You know, you should not be doing things. You know, I do worry about some of the aspects of this. You know, we were talking about the Easter holiday, the spring break, but call a spade a spade. We were talking about the Easter break, and someone said, well, shouldn't we have Easter Monday off? We talked about it here at the table. Shouldn't we have Easter Monday off? Because my kids are with their family on Sunday, and then we have to rush to get back together to school on Monday. And that, you know, my thinking on that was, you know, in my family, we used to pull the kids out in the afternoon on Passover to get to my in-laws' home, because that was the meal, that was the Seder was that night. So, you know, I don't know if I have a decision one way or the other on it. I'm trying to give you guys an insight into what my thinking is. It's because there are lots of opportunities to do this. And I think minimally we should be giving, without question, direction to staff around, these are holidays. Let's not, you know, even if the holiday is not a holiday that we honor or give half day or a full day or whatever, let's not put the kid in the spot that says, you know, that's the day the midterm is, and that's the day XYZ consequential thing. Let's minimize that if we can. For all.
Veer actually put together a presentation to the North staff. That was what, November, right? You were traveling. Was unable to make the staff meeting. Together PowerPoint, voiced over, shared about the holidays for our entire staff. So we are aware of additional.
For that.
Well,
for that community.
We're after the North community.
No, for the Islamic holidays. You have to,
No,
yeah, full Islam, not just around the holiday.
Yeah, Islamic holidays are Eid typically, so it's all about that. and at the volume to celebrate my
No problem. Cool, thank you.
I have a question. First of all, I supported the closing of primary day, but for me, I would prefer to close for this and take primary day back. But just as a question, I'm actually thinking that this could be really good for the staff. Is there some logic that it's better to get more professional development earlier in the calendar than it is at the end of the school year?
Well, when you look at how the calendar is set up, and let's take that last day, which is, I think on this calendar, June 17th, that day is really not teacher professional development. It's a day where teachers are closing up their classrooms, doing final grades, doing a lot of the end of year things they need to get done. So that's not really a PD day. And then the 2 days in April that you see there as flex days, most teachers do some kind of professional development or things throughout the year that they earn flex exchange hours. So those days really they trade them off in essence. So most of our professional development that happens in the district is usually finished by February, or if we have an early dismissal day in March. That half day in March, which is the 8th on this calendar, there'll be some professional development that day, but pretty much most of it is, at that point, is, yeah.
Use February 15th instead?
This wouldn't add a professional day anyhow.
Correct.
So in other words, if the day were off, it would have to be off for staff too, so that we didn't.
I understand, it was more,
Could you swap?
Yeah.
I may not have appropriately paused in life, but it was just a question because.
Would you take February 15th and take a professional development day on the 7th of November? Why couldn't you do that?
Well, you could, I mean, it's definitely possible, so then that would be rather than you're talking about rather than the primary day, like that day, it's a day off for students, and for teachers, and then the 7th is a day that teachers are here and not students. Is that what you're suggesting? I think.
Are you talking about moving it?
You're right, I can't have the building without teachers, kind of backwards. No, wait. Well, the kids are off on the 15th, right?
Yes, but teachers are not.
Right. So what if teachers were off on the 15th, but they came in on the 7th of November?
That's what you're
No,
saying.
I got it backwards. I got it all backwards.
Yeah.
I'm putting the pieces together inside out.
No, I don't think, I mean, I
No,
think what you're
yeah.
saying works. In other words, if you said 7th is not a student day, but it's a professional development day, it works.
Right.
My only concern would be the year to year, that's going to, fluctuate based on when Diwali is. So we know for the next 2 years it doesn't align. Now, we can still keep that as a staff day only.
You can put it back when it's appropriate. I mean,
I'm
I
just saying
say,
you could keep it, if you're trying to build your professional development specifically around getting something earlier, it doesn't have to be a day that aligns with the celebration. If it's on a weekend that we heard is happening in the 2 years.
you just don't keep it there anyhow if you wanted to. Yes, I mean, it's entirely possible. Or you could use, in the corporate world, we get float days, everybody, most people, you get 2 personal days you take somewhere. It doesn't work well with teachers because, with schools, everybody has to work together. You can move date, if it works well there for Diwali and then you don't need it there, you can move it to wherever you think you want it that year. I don't care.
The potential possible challenge with taking away the day in February is coupled with President's Day weekend, which is a long weekend. So we typically have off, kids have off that following Monday. So quite often there are people that will take long weekends on that President's Day weekend. So they might, because the kids are off that Friday, families will go away. So, thinking about our entire population, you could have some community members and families who aren't happy with now that students have to go to school on the day before the long President's Day weekend.
Well, the district
Not
used to
saying
have
that
the
that's a
Friday
reason not to do it,
For
but
many, many years, the district had the Friday before Martin Luther King Day off, and we had to take it away for that reason.
Well, when I first came to the board, the whole Thanksgiving week was chopped up, which was the 2 days before Thanksgiving were parent-teacher conferences. It was like or the Monday was a half day, the Monday was a day off, it made no sense.
And we had no spring break.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, we haven't heard from Mary Ann or Ed yet, really, but I think it's what I hear some of the others saying is trying to find a way to make this work. What would you guys say is the best, if we were gonna find an alternative date to make room for this day? What would it be? What would you do?
I felt from the beginning, and I don't honestly recall if I stated it publicly, but I was always dubious that there was security concern around the primary election. I agree with Mark. I mean, there's a whole lot of good citizens in our schools that day, but I don't think it's a security issue. So I'd be happy to reclaim the spring primary election.
The only thing, if I can just comment on that, so the only concern that I think you would have with giving up primary election day is that if we do have many snow days, you can't recapture that. So then we're going deeper into the summer, and that's probably the only option, right, at that point. But I think that's the obvious and best way to go. If I can say one more thing, Barry, before you say something. The other thing is, we are a teaching organization, and if we have the opportunity to have a day off for a holiday like Diwali, and that begins in elementary school, well, we have many years of teaching what Diwali is about to the kids, because they're going to know, right? Because why do we have off? So I think it's an absolute benefit.
To be the 7th, we'd end up having Tuesday, Wednesday off that week.
On this particular calendar, yes.
So for next year, because, I mean, what I cited for you early on was to give you a sense of worst case scenario. That's not what next year's calendar aligns today. In other words, I don't know that you certainly can make the change with the primary election day. I don't know that it's necessary to do that for this particular year, because we're starting,
What's the last day again?
the last day is the 14th for students. So you would have to it would move it to the 17th, because you would add that day. So you'd have to have 6 snow days before you would jump into that final week of the year. So next year, you may have the luxury, if you wanted to consider keeping school closed for the students and staff on that primary day, if that's something you want to consider. We have 2 years after that where Diwali does not fall within the school calendar, that you could continue with what's been more traditional, and you have 3 years to really consider whether or not that primary election day is worth taking out of the calendar.
Let me ask you, so in that, if we just pulled the 7th, we gave them off the 7th.
Students and staff.
Then our last day of school would be Monday the 17th.
Correct.
When would we be able to, could we still graduate the seniors on the 14th, or would we have to wait till Monday?
Well, we do it, we move our graduation to the last day of school. So if we had multiple snow days, it would be the 17th or the 18th or the 19th or the 20th, wherever it may fall. There are districts that pick a date, because there's a lot of school districts that take their students outside of the school district because they have to rent a facility. They lock in graduation and
Which we did last year, right? Did we kind of?
No, we moved it to the last day, yeah. Yeah, we talked about it because it fell on a Friday.
I'd raise that issue. I would love to not get the graduation date and have it not be.
So back to my question, so the 7th, the primary primary election day is when? Is it
May 21st.
May 21st?
Yep.
So is that a snow day clawback?
It is not.
It is not?
No, it's not. The only days that are outside of the end of the school year are the first 2 days of the spring break. That
we can vote change the calendar anytime we want.
That's why I left it on the calendar last time.
No, I'm just saying, because I'm of the mind right now that we recognize the holiday, we give them the day off, we leave we leave the primary election day off today, and then if we see snow days coming, we can always make we could, right, make an adjustment to put that day back in the calendar.
And I would just suggest, if you're thinking about doing that, you put a note in the calendar that states that, so that it's.
Color the calendar now.
I like that idea.
Can you do me a favor to slide back up to September, October? The other thing which, Barry, I think you just have to include in your calculus going forward is those 2 days, they happen to be the 10th and the 11th now, followed by the 19th. At some years, and you'll have to coordinate this with that, some years, some of those days are
It
going
is
to be
the following
weekends.
year.
What?
Actually, it does fall on the weekend the following year.
Well, at least one or,
Well, I think even this current year, we only had 2 days.
and even just to say, I don't know, I wasn't here for it. I don't know the practice around here. The eastern half of the state is different than the western half of the state. I don't know about the 2 days off for Rosh Hashanah. I don't know, how much that candidly, I was quite surprised when I went to services the second day and there was nobody there. So I don't know if that's how that convention works here. I was a Reformed congregation, so I don't know how that works here. I'm not looking, they say robbing Peter to pay Paul, which is a whole different religion, but I'm curious about how, how required are the 2 days at this point in our community?
I think it's a habit.
It is.
Okay, I mean, and it's
So I'm
funny,
asking,
I
I'm trying
will
to
take
be-
1 day off from work. And
As
when my
well.
kids were at school, it's like, what am I gonna do with my kids? They're off and I have to go to work. But the other thing is, there's just a whole convergence of different things, because next year, we're gonna start with the Labor Day. So that already changes, and not that year, but in the 1920 school year, because of where Labor Day falls, we're already starting before Labor Day, which gives a lot of wiggle room anyway, not even knowing, and actually in the Jewish holidays, I know for a fact are on weekend. So you might end up ending in June very early. Oh, actually, and fall on them, yeah, so you're gonna end up early anyway. So you can always have these moving targets.
I get the sense from the board, if that's what, because the calendar's going to come up every year. You're going to have to vote on the calendar every year. The sense from the board is the board's preference would be to try to incorporate it. Go with it. As you said, it's probably not difficult to do this year. It's your planning. You get 2 years of a grace period because it doesn't seem to fall. And move forward with that. It gives you 3 years of planning and 2 more years to think about it and figure out how to make it work. And what other options are available? I'm sure I will get flack from people in the community saying, well, we need 2 days for Rosh Hashanah. But I don't know that everybody does. I don't know how that works.
So if we make that change in a draft calendar, I guess the question is, do we try to get it up for vote in February or next week?
I'll support it.
Well, I guess the only question I have is, in the past, we've had it available for the public to comment. Do we need to do that with the change, or are you comfortable with
I think we're.
putting it up for vote?
I think we should probably, if we agree, we should probably try and get it out tonight, but we're adding a holiday, we're adding a day off, we're not moving anything material. So I wouldn't have a problem voting.
The biggest complaint people have about calendars, the complaints we have received time immemorial are, I made my vacation time already for August.
I mean, if somebody wants to complain because we're adding this, I don't have time.
But it's not interfering with the things that people complain about. When school starts, what the spring break is, and how much time around the change of the year. And those are the 3 things people complain about.
It does push it back automatically into the next week in June, just as the end day.
That's not a thing people really complain about.
If we don't recapture primary election.
Correct.
If we do, then we're in the same week.
Correct. That's a swap.
But
That
I mean,
versus-
you don't know if you're gonna have snow days or not. I mean, our last day now is Monday, so you never really know. Just I'm not gonna be at the meeting next week. I would absolutely support this calendar, but I won't be here.
I like the idea of getting,
No, I haven't spoken to this. I'm in agreement. I would really support us working this into the calendar. I remember many years ago, Council Rock was not on the forefront of observing the Martin Luther King holiday. I don't know if any of you
Oh, yeah.
remember that. And I don't think that, personally, that to me was not our proudest moment. I think that this could be something we'd be very proud in being on the forefront of. So I would support it. You can work your magic on that calendar.
Well, back to the Monday piece. So if we just pulled that out, then we are in school Monday, graduation moves to Monday.
Without any
Without any
interruptions,
changes.
correct.
So I guess the only question comes, how do we feel about graduation on that Monday versus a Friday? And I know that can still depend on snow days.
Which is what you have this year now, right? We're in.
As of
Yeah.
right now.
We just jumped into the next week after with our
Either
day
way,
off.
okay. Friday or Monday, either way, people are gonna have parties on the weekend and graduate.
Well, it speaks to, first of all, I mean, I've said this in previous years on the calendar. I'm just gonna say it so it's recorded this time. I would love to see us have a conversation where we could lock in graduation in advance, so grandparents and family and everybody can plan and know when graduation is, not waiting until, like, we have this crazy winter and you're waiting until April. And the other thing is, I don't know why we can't approve more than 1 year's calendar at a time, so that we don't have to do this. If we can do 2 years at a time, it helps people plan long-term for things.
Administratively, I think we would support locking in graduation.
Thank you.
We've had that conversation.
Yeah, I mean, we can't get a straight answer about what that means to us as a district from PDE. That's been our trouble with coming with that model.
Bucks
Yeah,
County do that.
they do. We just don't know if there are, we keep trying to find out if there's financial implications based on the subsidy, and Bob Reinhardt can't even find the answer to that.
Well, it's also a discussion we've had.
Sorry.
We've had, it also becomes a staff thing, which is you pick a date that's beyond the end of where your school year is.
Well, I'm not talking about making it beyond the school year.
Well,
You'd have to make it safely within.
well, I want to be careful about what's ceremony, what's for show and what's for go, because you cannot confer, if they don't, well, I guess most of the students at that point actually have enough credits to graduate early at that point anyhow.
Can I suggest we debate that next time, just to, in the interest of time? I mean, are there 5 in support of, we got 6 at the table, are there 5 in support for doing this on Thursday?
Yes.
Absolutely.
We'll get it done and
Gary, Ed,
in the agenda.
you won't be to call in, or you?
I'll call in if this needs the vote, it's.
I don't think it'll.
I don't think it will.
When we come to your
It's gonna
committee
be
report,
difficult.
you can introduce this. We don't have to go through a great discussion about it, but it'll come out to your committee report, vote it right after that.
Thank you.
Good work. Good work.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Also working on it.
Yeah, Mary. Ed said to you, Mark,
One other thing to consider about primary election day that was an issue is physical space. Interior and exterior, last time we had that, there was an issue with parking at one school. And also the gridlock when voters came and left during December. The other part was interior space would be the space you would dedicate for voters, could be instructional space as well. If you have your art room and your art teachers there, what does that instruction look like that day? So there's several things to consider.
I remember seeing Mr. Long when I was picking up on election day.
Can we also be aware?
Wasn't
Can we also be aware and in touch with the Board of Elections around Newtown Middle School? Or that's for when you're doing that, because the building will have moved and they will need to rejig all that.
Yeah.
There'll be people showing up at the old building.
In the space going, where's the building? I used to vote here, where is it?
Next year, it's gonna be there next year. So,
Andy, that's like me going back to Penn State looking for roads that don't go anywhere.
So I think that concludes
For the
the
rest.
section of the calendar.
I think so.
Excellent. And now, PLCs, thank you.
All right.
Mr. Elliott.
Thank you. So we're giving you an update on PLCs tonight, in particular, really looking at the schedule. So this summer and the fall, administration met to really look at how do we prioritize time in the schedule so that we are giving teachers regular time to meet as collaborative teams. And tonight we have some building level administrators here to help explain some of the changes. So at the elementary level, we have Mr. Joe McClay from Holland and Dr. Danielle Jordan from Richboro. And then from the middle level, we have Mr. Tim Long from Newtown Middle School and Mr. Jason Truskevich from North. We're going to go through the different levels and explain some of the changes that they came up with that we all kind of worked on as a team. First, just to kind of reiterate why we're doing this and why this is so important. You know, our focus is centered on PLCs because we think that, you know, this is a really good fit for us as a district. You know, we're already successful and our teachers already continue to search for most effective practices and they want to ensure student success. And we know from research that PLCs and their effectiveness are supported in research. In June 2017, a report published by the Learning Policy Institute, Linda Darling-Hammond and her colleagues found that professional learning communities, when implemented with a high degree of quality, support improvements in practice along with student learning gains. Well-implemented PLCs provide ongoing job-embedded learning that is active, collaborative, and reflective. And that really speaks to what our teachers value in Council Rock, the ability to engage in the type of professional learning that really supports their practice. And also the piece with PLCs that makes it really powerful for us as a district is that it empowers our teachers to really engage in professional learning that focuses on real-time data with their kids in their classrooms and things that they can take back immediately as they work collaboratively. And it also, as we've talked before, as teachers are working on answering the 4 critical questions that PLCs discuss, it engages them in ensuring that regardless of what building the student is in and what teacher that student has, that we are guaranteeing, because we as a district have determined what's most essential for kids to learn, that every student is learning those essential skills. So just a history of our timeline to give you a sense of where we've been and where we're going. So back in 2012, we started with some research on PLCs and getting some teacher feedback, and started to build our knowledge as we've gone through the last couple years. We had a few teams. We had a full pilot building at Churchville, and we started to last year engage teachers in preparing for PLC. So last year, teachers did a lot of work around the first essential question of what is most essential for students to learn, and they really worked on prioritizing the curriculum. This year, we have pilot teams in every single building, at least one pilot team in every building. We have a couple of buildings where we have multiple pilot teams. Teachers volunteered to be a pilot team and attended training this summer, and they're now working as pilot teams. And we also set up a guiding coalition in each building. So a guiding coalition is like a leadership team, and their focus is on really building knowledge themselves about professional learning communities, but also helping to build knowledge in their buildings as well. In our pilot teams, at least one teacher from the pilot team is on the guiding coalition in that building as well. And so they're continuing to learn from the pilot teams as they're working, and the guiding coalition is learning from them. 2018-19, which is next year, as we've talked about before, is our goal for full implementation, meaning every teacher will be on a collaborative team. In order for that to happen, we have to make sure we have time in the schedule for them to meet. And that is what our principals had really worked on this summer and the fall, to really process how do we do that? How do we find time? So again, these are the questions that the teams, when they're engaged in their work, these are the 4 questions that they focus on answering. Really targets what is it that kids have to learn? How do we know when they haven't learned it? So how are we going to assess their progress along the way? And then the last 2 questions, what do we do if they haven't learned it? And what about the ones that have learned it? What do we do for them? Thinking about how do we intervene when they need help, and how do we enrich when they've learned it? This graphic here shows a cycle of what the teams do as they work together. So it's a 4-step cycle that teams engage in, and it correlates to the 4 questions. So step 1, where teams really look at what is it that students really, what's most essential for students to learn, that really correlates with question 1, critical question 1. Step 2 really coordinates with critical question 2, which is how do we know when they've learned it? And that's designing assessments for learning, or formative assessments. Step 3 is really what they're doing in their classroom. So step 3 is the teaching. They design instruction, and then they deliver the instruction in their classrooms. And they work together as a team to think about what are the best ways to teach and help students learn this. And then step 4 is where we capture questions 3 and 4 together. So we've given a formative assessment, and as a team now we're going to look at our data, our results, and make decisions about how do kids do, Do we need to analyze our practices and see, was there something that seemed to work for some kids better than other kids? What can we learn from each other as practitioners, as well as making decisions? So the kids that didn't get it, what do we do for them? And as a team, they think about what they could do to intervene, as well as how do we enrich the kids that got it. So each team goes through this cycle, and there isn't a prescribed amount of time that you spend on each step, because sometimes things might take a little bit longer than others. Step 3, where they're actually instructing, that might take, a week or more, and they'll determine when are we going to assess. And then step 4 would involve them then, in addition to analyzing the data, making a decision and acting on what they're going to do. So it's a cycle that they will, the pilot teams learned this summer and are going through this cycle, and this will be the cycle that we encourage and show teachers and help them go through as well as they start working as collaborative teams. So when we talk about finding time in the schedule, as we know, we're not adding any more hours to the day for teachers or students. We can't find more hours in the day. So that means we have to figure out how to prioritize our time. And that means that we may need to make some trade-offs, because in order to find time for something and prioritize time for teachers to meet, that means maybe something has to give a little bit. And that was the challenge of the principals throughout this summer and the fall, of trying to figure out what are our priorities and what are we willing to trade off? What are the things we can give up? And you're going to see when we go through each level that there are differences across the level based on what we're trading off and what's important at those levels. And I'm going to turn it over to the principals, and we're going to start with elementary. And what we'll do, I thought might work best, is after each level, we'll pause for a second for you to, if there are any particular questions about that level, to ask before we go on to the next level. So Joe, I'll hand the slide over to you, and you can go ahead and start talking about the elementary level.
One of the things we had talked about was over and over what we valued, what was most important. Although there was disagreement at times, we did come back to certain things. One is that our collaboration for time for teams was going to vary from building to building based on the size of the team, the size of the building. And we were able to pretty much work that out with common prep. It could be during the prep, could be the beginning of the day. We knew we had to find time for that intervention enrichment time. That was probably what dictated the most with regard to our conversation changes and trade-offs. We did all value morning meeting with regard to building that sense of community of learners in every school. And then the other part would be is to not take it all from one instructional, one piece of instructional time. We wanted to maintain all 4 core subjects. What we did is we reduced some minutes in ELIM in 1st to 3rd, social studies and science in 1st to 6th. Since all the students have 30 minutes of recess, we did reduce 1st and 3rd by 15 minutes to 30 minutes. And that was
1st and 3rd.
First and third, first, second, and third.
Great.
Rates, yes, yeah. And then we made changes to make all the specials 45 minutes. It used to be, it's currently 50 minutes for 4th, 5th, and 6th, and 40 minutes for 1st, 2nd, and 3rd.
That meets the requirements of the special for gifted programs. Are there requirements around the gifted programs and humanities about?
That is no special classes, gym, art music.
Okay.
Relative to social studies. Does that impact?
No, it's not good. It actually was one of the topics that we did discuss over and over. It's not going to affect it. We're still going to make sure the instruction is delivered for the kids who are in the humanities program. That will happen.
I was just saying, is there a requirement? I know there's a class size restriction on how many, on the ratio. Is there an aspect of time also? And does that stay within the boundaries if there is an aspect of time?
In GIPs, we don't talk about minutes. We do talk about the subjects that we covered. Yeah, percent.
Joe, I apologize. You reduced recess by 15 minutes. How long is recess before the reduction?
45 total minutes for grades 1 to 3, and 4 to 6 have 30 minutes.
I'm going to break my own.
4 to 6
rule. I was
has
hoping-
30 minutes?
It's well, 30 minutes, so it's, all of the grade levels have one 30-minute block, and then grades 1, 2, and 3 have a 15-minute time period later on in the day.
We have a second recess.
Correct.
So I was hoping that we would wait until the end of
I'm
the
sorry, that's
presentation.
my fault.
But all right, I have questions also, so if we can try and hold and
Yes.
see it in its entirety, please. Thank you.
There's a lot to digest in the next 2 slides. So what you'll see in the dark area is part of the present number of minutes, and then the proposed are in the lighter shades. You'll see it broken down for both daily and weekly.
I will say in the work and the research that at all 3 levels, but in speaking at the elementary level, they looked at schedules from other districts, really reached out to kind of see what are other districts doing relative to instructional minutes and different things. And these were some of the reasons that they led to making some of the reduction in some of the areas that they did, was because they noticed that comparable districts have, for example, I think Central Bucks has much less time in social studies and science than we do. So, you know, looking to shave some minutes off from multiple areas enabled us to capture some time, particularly for intervention and enrichment at the elementary level.
These are the primary grades.
So we can,
Yes, sure.
so I just want to make sure I'm getting it right.
Yes.
So next year, if there's 100 total minutes in science, that means that they're getting, they're going from having science for 20 minutes, I'm sorry, from 25 minutes a day to 20 minutes?
Yes,
Yes.
But math, they're actually taking
And
it
then-
up from 45 to 60.
yes,
And the specials are all going up for 5 minutes?
yes.
What is the rationale on that? I'm just-
So for the specials, you mean?
Well, just, I mean, it's just like, I would think, you know, like our science PSSA grades aren't great, our science keystones aren't great, but like, and we're taking time away from science. So, I mean, I realize in grades 1 to 3, maybe, you know, they're making it up later, but what's the rationale? Not that I'm opposed to adding to math, but you know, the overall was how are we gonna capture time from PLCs, but what was the rationale where you've added and where you've taken away?
So math is an area where probably 45 minutes of math is not enough. We should have more math instruction at the primary level. So it was a way that we could capture a little bit more time in math. And in science and social studies, you know, we've cut 5 minutes, and we've also cut, I think it's 16 minutes a day from language arts. So, you know, we've been trying to find that 30-minute intervention block, which will be used for supporting students who need some additional support with, whether it's math, language arts, and eventually could also be science and social studies as teams continue to work with the priority standards. Right now, they've only focused on math and language arts as priority standards at the elementary level, because it's hard to do all 4 of them at one time curricularly. So it was, in a way, trying to, what are the, you know, the trade-offs we can make, but still feel that we have sufficient time to ensure that students master the curriculum that they need to master in those subject areas. And feedback from our science and social studies coordinator, they believe that we can make it work with the 20 minutes a day as opposed to 25.
In addition, work would be done, and we currently do it to see how can we embed minutes in one particular subject area into another. For example, morning meeting, there are books that the Northeast Foundation puts out about how you put social studies and science, and even math and ELA into morning meeting, into your morning message. The other part is just getting a chance, whether it be ELA and doing our writing and research, it could be social studies and science. I'm going to move on to.
So let's just look at the transition.
Sure, yeah.
So you're pulling those out?
Yeah, when we had that discussion, and there are transitions, that when we think about these as 5 minutes, you may think it could be the beginning of the day, the end of the day, getting, primary students to pack up and write down items in their homework book. There are transitions in every part of the day. If we were to list all of our transitions.
Oh, okay, I was reading that assignment between classes or something.
Yeah, I mean,
Is that flex time with you? Sort of? For lack of a better word.
yeah, it is walking. It can be one subject to another. It can be walking the specials, walking the lunch and recess. Managing transition to make sure that it's done effectively and maximize instructional time is really a key component of good instruction. So. And this is 4th or 6th.
We take about an hour off of science and social studies.
And I'm sorry, our curriculum coordinators in science and social studies are aware of this. And
Yes. We had discussions with them, talked about the pros and cons, what we can do to support teachers, how we can make it work. So yes, they are.
One of the key parts that teachers are firm about is about being able to provide that intervention block. Sometimes we talk about children who may move from one grade level to another. And has it ever been the case that a child hasn't mastered all the content? And what we want to do is make sure that doesn't happen. We talk about essential learning targets. And if we were going to go through and teach a topic, a lesson, a unit, and a child didn't fully grasp it, how are we going to address that? And that's one of the critical questions. What do we do when a student hasn't learned it? And we have to have that time to be able to provide that help to them.
And that is the quintessential shift of a professional learning community, which is a shift from teaching to learning. Yeah, we have this inch-deep, mile-wide curriculum in the United States that we all grew up with, we've all used to. Most of the advanced countries who outperform us don't have that. And I think you're looking at a schedule that prioritizes learning. Is that data-driven approach that Sue had up on one of those earlier slides? And without the time there, without that 30-minute intervention block each and every day, the opportunity to act on that simply isn't there. So.
And what's the impact like on the overall scheduling? Like taking away reset, a second recess, this specials times are shorter, like are the lunches going to shift? Like how, from a scheduling.
As far as what the day will look like?
Yeah.
Well, that would be unique to the buildings based on the size of the building, how many sections of a grade level they have. So all of those pieces with where specials will fall, lunch will still be 30 minutes with 30 minutes of recess, and probably about the same time as it is right now in the day at each building. That most likely will not change, but what will change is the minutes and how they're allocated across the day for the different the subject areas.
To what extent are the 30 minutes a day for intervention and enrichment essentially individualized attention for students?
So the intervention piece is something that as we continue to develop and get better with professional learning communities, we'll get more fine-tuned in what that looks like and how to utilize that time. So I can tell you from, what other districts have done and some of the work and things that we've read through Solution Tree and other research on professional learning communities and reading that I've done, that it varies how they utilize that time. In some cases, particularly at the elementary level where teachers are all teaching the same grade level that are close to each other, they can be really creative with how to utilize that 30 minutes. So they can look at their data and see, all right, there are 4 of us teaching in this grade level, and we notice that these 10 kids that are from a mix from all 4 of our classes aren't getting this concept after we've done a formative assessment. So we know that in this teacher's particular classroom, he or she had a really good way to teach that, and most of his or her kids got it. So we're gonna take those 10 kids, and for this half hour, they're gonna go work with that teacher. And we're gonna take the rest of the kids and divide them up among the remaining teachers and do some different activities, enrich the kids that need enriching, and really build some of their skills. That's one way that some schools do it. Some schools will have other staff members that can also come in at that same time frame and support. So it might be like a math specialist, a literacy specialist, an IST teacher, different positions. There's unique ways that you can really capitalize on that time. The key about that time is the team dedicates to no new instruction during that time. So we're not teaching any new concept to the kids that somebody's going to miss because they have to receive additional support. This time is dedicated to us meeting kids' needs based on the data that we've been gathering and in creative ways. Mm-hmm.
So we wanted to take a look at the research and then also what local school districts are doing to inform our decision-making about recess. The state of Pennsylvania doesn't have specific guidelines as to the amount of time. So we took a look, for instance, the National Association for Sport and Physical Education recommends a total of 20 minutes of recess time. The American Heart Association recommends 30 minutes. So keeping in mind that we do have that 30-minute block and are intending to keep that. And then overall, that breaks we know are really critical for our students. So taking away recess, we're not denying the fact that that's essentially important. It reduces that academic fatigue. It really, it helps the students stay fresh and increases those brain connections so that they can retain information, and also that breaks will be scheduled at regular intervals. So what we'd like to do, what we're currently doing, is to continue with our teachers are building in already movement breaks, both within and then between lessons, and then in all content areas, as well as during our specials. Recess for 30 minutes, and then they have a lunch block for 30 minutes. And then taking a look at other districts that are similar to us and are nearby, you can see that we are well within by maintaining that 30-minute recess in line with the districts that are local to us. So 30 minutes, and then with Wissahickon being at the lower end of 15, and then with not having that second recess. If you take a look at the research, it really does support. But when you take a look at the best practices, instructional practices for kids, and what makes the greatest impact, that targeted instruction and intervention time is essential. It's really top of the list. So it really is important for us to build this time into the schedule. And what the research says about recess, really what's the main point is that it should be, breaks should be occurring throughout the day. So what we want to do and continue to do is empower our teachers to give those breaks when they're needed versus building in a 15-minute block of time.
So before we start at the middle level, any other questions about elementary?
Does this change what we do with our facilities around the exterior portion around recess? I just wonder, I'm not trying to get rid of playground equipment, but does it change long-term if this stays as a plan? Does this change anything about the way we structure our facilities?
I wouldn't think so. Principal, would you agree?
Yes, you're really talking about 45 minutes of time that is now currently used on the playground. It wouldn't be.
Short of the 30 cents.
It's the equivalent of last 10 years old.
First, second, third grade, 15 minutes each.
Basically.
I was trying to be Scrooge.
And the impact on the recess days?
So the recess days, we did take a look at that. We would be repurposing that time, not shortening their hours of the day.
What would you be clear?
So we're going to work with CRESPA and recess aides to look at what we can do to repurpose their time. So that we haven't made that decision yet. We still need to meet with them to talk about.
I don't mean to be discourteous, but I don't know that's to be repurposed or if that's to go fed back in as money into the fund to fund some things, So I don't know that I want to count those as free people, and I have to use them. We had a great potential. There was times when we've had other staff members used for the wrong positions in this district because they were available. At one point we had technology aides who were being used to make photocopies. It was the wrong that ended many years ago. But, so I hear what you say. I just want to be conscious that it's not a free resource. It's if they're not needed, they're not needed. And we'll put the money back in the budget somewhere else. And, you know, I'll wear Wendy's hat here and say, we'll buy textbooks or we'll buy something academic.
I have a couple of questions and comment. When we compared our science social studies time, I think you compared it to CV, saying they had less social studies science time, but I believe they have, as one of their specials, it's dedicated to STEM. Is that correct?
They do, yes, they have a class special.
Okay, so while they have less instructional minutes compared to what we were looking at for Council Rock, they do have a dedicated block of time for STEM.
They do.
Okay, so I have some concerns about the time that we're losing in social studies and science. And again, I have great confidence and respect for the administration, for the teachers who will be doing this, but losing instructional time while we can be creative and try and insert it in other ways, my initial impression is I'm concerned about that. A question. I know that morning meeting is of great value and especially in primary grades. Does every sixth grade do morning meeting? Not every sixth grade does. So when I saw those minutes up there for 4 to 6, that may not be the case. Do you have any idea of the 10 elementaries, how many sixth grades still do morning meeting?
No, I don't. I know one thing is that they use elements of it. They also use distorted circles. So that sort of aspect of that time is used, and they use it sometimes when it is not planned. That in the recess and there's an issue that's going on, it's time to work sort of circle. So that's what we can use.
Okay, thanks for that. I had another question too when you referenced the time for intervention and enrichment and understanding that is going to look different in every building according to need. It sounds to me as though you'll be utilizing math specialists, reading specialists. How much more will be required then in addition to what they're currently doing in buildings? How will they be able to slot in to provide enrichment and intervention in addition to their current load?
I don't think it'll be more. I think, for example, if children were going to math for some remediation, maybe that would be used in a different way when they were pushing in during the intervention block to supply that out.
Okay, so that might look different, and say enrichment math may look different as well.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things we have really worked out with how we work with employee specialists.
Let's see. And the question that ties in with that, how will these changes be presented to parents? Changes to what math specialists might be doing with their kids, or my child will have 15 minutes less recess. How is that going to be presented to parents?
So we've already at the buildings have rolled this out to the staff first. So they had an opportunity to at all levels to hear actually about the changes at all 3 levels. So all staff are aware that it's happening at all 3 levels and what some of those changes are. And I will be working with Susan O'Grady, our community relations specialist. We've already started drafting some FAQs, and we'll work on messaging to communicate to parents about some of these changes and what that might mean. As far as the roles of some of like the specialists and things as an administrative team, and then tapping into getting feedback from our coordinators and some of our specialists, trying to best figure out what their role is. Once we figure out some of those pieces, then we can also communicate that part out as well.
Thank you. Anybody else with questions?
All right, on to the middle level. Mr. Tim Locke.
All right, guys, stand up real quick. 30 seconds. Stand up, stretch your legs out. 30 seconds, watch the clock. I'm gonna do
Practicing what
30
we
seconds.
preach, right?
We got the energy. We're almost done. Middle level's real easy, actually. Compared to 2 others. All right, we'll make it 20 seconds. All right, here we go. So middle level is a tough animal to manage in that there's some things that we talk about. So we want to maintain the middle level concept, right? It's important for kids to commit to a setting and feel connected. So we take middle school, we take a big school and make them into 6 small schools. So we're trying to now marry 2 collaborative groups. One collaborative group is the multidisciplinary team together kids sets in. So we have 7th graders, 3 teams. The multidisciplinary team we put kids into. And they collaborate, those teachers collaborate every day. But that collaboration is not the same type of collaboration that's needed for this to be successful. It's important. We're talking about social development, emotional development, and we're talking about the kids' academic progress, but not specific to the type that we're talking about with PLCs. So we have to marry some things. So we have to be tight about maintaining our schedule, maintaining teams, maintaining a soft place to get the land moving from elementary school to middle school. So those are important to us. And so we have to figure out a way to manage and integrate both the PLC concept, which again, another collaborative group, which is more deliberate in its conversation. It's more directed. It's more direct in the conversation. Talking about standards, talking about state standards, and how can we best, what's our priority? How can we best make sure our kids are getting this information? So we had to build that time into our schedule. And luckily for us, it matches to what we currently have. We can repurpose our resource activity period and extend it 2 days a week. So if you're looking at this schedule in front of you, notice 3A day and notice 6B day. Notice that the period, the normal days on 1A, 2B, the period length are 44 minutes in length. All we're doing is shortening it out to 42 minutes on those other days. And what we've done now successfully is added, instead of having 30 minutes, we've added 44 minutes to that very beginning of the day. And that is going to be our target time to have our teachers meet and have conversations regarding their content. What is important for kids to learn? What are the common formative assessments our kids we can each share and give to provide for our kids? Then when we're meeting, we're talking about what kids learn, what's the data telling us, and how can we get better? And that's the beautiful thing about this process is to allow teachers, much like what was said, your kids did really well. Now what we'll do is down the road and hopefully next year, that year remediation. So we'll have those 3 teachers who are working together and they all have that time off on that RA time together. In a team model, teachers don't have the same time off. In a team model, they have one science teacher have grade 1 have periods 1 and 2 off. One science teacher have grade 1 have 4 and 5 off, etc. They don't have that common time. But RA allows us to gather and grab that time for those teachers to work together. In fact, we've already started that in a small level. We have two PLC teams running in the middle level, and they're using that time exactly for that. So the question was asked tonight, what are you doing with kids that get it? Well, we have a team of 3 science teachers and also our special ed teacher embedded working together. And they've done those things, and they've done some remediation with kids. They pull kids, they do a common formative assessment. There's a new app on the phone they're using, which gives them immediate feedback and immediate data. And they look 6 questions, and there's not a lot. If you're targeting one specific piece, you get the information, and they skim those kids off, and they meet separately at 1 RA time. So we're already doing a lot of the things that PLCs are offering. But again, in the middle level, the only shift we're having is embedded in our RA time, which we're going to extend it 2 days a week. And it's 3A day and it's a 6B day, and allow that to happen. Everything else stays consistent, rotating schedule. Why is that important? Because if you look on this, you'll see it doesn't show you real easy, but our lunchtime, those classes right here, are always 60 minutes. So if we lock our schedule 1 through 7 every day for the last one, just do the same schedule every single day. Well, this period here, wherever lunch falls in, it's always going to be 60 minutes every single day. The rest of the class is either 44, 42. Now you have it's going to be inaccurate as far as numbers. It's not going to be balanced. So we rotate the schedule. The other piece that rotating schedule allows for us to continue to do is because we're all stronger probably when we got here. We got started at 6 tonight. I'm sure you're all stronger at 6 than you are now at 8, 8:45. So it allows for rotating. So you always have an opportunity to have your favorite class when you're stronger. You can be morning person or afternoon person, but you always have an opportunity to have your favorite class at least one time a day when you're strongest. And at the end of the day, when we have our kids leaving for the athletics, it's never the same class.
And the fact that there's 2 extra minutes on those 2 days, it just dismissed.
It is, and what happens is, see, what's happened over the course of time, prior to the PLC would jump into the council block, we would spend a lot of time on and would maximizing class time instruction. So teachers have gotten really good at building in routines. The kids walk into a class, and you walk in, you'll see goals on the board, and the kids, without the teacher engaging in any way, they'll walk in and they'll start the process. Write down information, hand out information, take attendance. All these things are happening without the teacher saying, okay, time to get started. So those routines that Marzano had kind of been talked about, was it 6 years ago? Those are all still embedded in the process of good instruction. I think that was. Yeah, that's what I said. Middle school, not about change. Just maximize what we already have developed. Thank you. Well.
Now, you'll notice at the middle school, and you'll hear this also at the high school, the one difference is that the elementary was able to find that time and embed it in the schedule for intervention and enrichment next year. At the middle level and the high school level, that's something that they want to do a little bit more exploration next year to try to figure out the best way to find that time. We still will have clinic as an opportunity to provide extra support for students while we can't require them to come. It is a way that teachers can try to connect with kids as well as some other creative ways. But the intervention piece is something that middle school administrators and high school administrators are going to continue to work on next year to get feedback from teachers as well about how do we find that time? How do we embed that into the day? Because the schedules are a little bit more challenging to easily shave things off and find time. So, high school.
And originally, one of our priorities was to look at that remediation and enrichment time, but immediately our staff, because we have a number of pilot teams this year, but we're not running PLCs building-wide at South full. The staff essentially immediately went to how do we remediate, how do we enrich, rather than stepping back and really looking at what do we want them to know, and how do we know they know it. So we're never going right to step 3, truly understanding step 1 and 2. So our priority kind of shifted a little bit, saying we need to find opportunities for staff really to collaborate together during the confines of a contractual day. And currently we have staff meeting 3 times a month at around 2:15 to 2:55 for PLC meetings. But trying to find that additional day to meet, it was difficult because we have clinic on Tuesdays and Thursdays. We have CREA meetings. We have department coordinator meetings. We have department meetings. We have after-school activities with the parent. There's so much going on that we're already limited. So one of the ideas we're considering looking at is, adding it into the beginning of the day. We didn't want to do a complete overhaul of our schedule. We have our 9-period day with 6 classes. We have our alternate day schedule, our semester schedule. We have morning MBIT, afternoon MBIT, shuttle courses. So we couldn't have a constantly changing schedule every single day because it's going to impact so many other factors, as well as the instructional minutes. Mr. Desker spoke about earlier this evening. When we're looking at, in particular, our 10th and our 11th grade students who are morning MBIT, afternoon north or south, we're pretty close to total instructional hours that they must meet that 495. Even the difference of 1 minute that they're present every day really translates to 3 hours overall. So we really work tight with that. So what we're considering looking at doing here is actually having really the school day start at 7:33, the first period not beginning until 8:33. So we understand there would be issues with transportation, but we would ask that approximately once a month we would have a delayed opening. Families would be notified well in advance. They can provide their own transportation. They can bring the students in for the 8:33 start time. Or if they cannot, the students are able to take Council Rock transportation to north and south. And we would be monitoring the students in the auditorium, the cafeterias, et cetera, with their support staff and administration. This would allow for the staff to actually have that time, kind of duty-free, so to say, in which they can meet as their PLC groups for that 4th time each month. So this really doesn't make a dramatic change to the overall schedule. So we're looking at 180 days. So 170 would follow the normal schedule. It would just be once a month. We would have this late opening. As you see here, generally our classes are about 56 minutes currently. So there would be a decrease in time, around 42, but it wouldn't be that half-day effect. we're at a 2-hour delay, where you're having 20-minute classes on a 2-hour delay, or if you have a half day, you're not seeing your afternoon classes. Students would be able to see all their teachers and have a strong enough amount of time to really have a valuable class instruction going on. The midpoint of the day, you still understand 26 minutes each, which gives you about 52-minute class period or so. That's our lunch periods. We really can't get much shorter than 26 minutes, where you may have upwards of 600 students in the cafeteria at one time. Just that cleanup and transportation back and forth.
Is homeroom now 5 minutes?
Homeroom right now is 13. So this would be just a quick, we have to distribute materials, any urgent announcements. No, morning announcements will not be shown that day.
The homeroom is attached to first period.
Correct.
So the meeting activity, so 6 times a year you're thinking of doing that?
Upwards of 10, once a month.
So is that something, I mean, you have assemblies now, would that not be the time to schedule things to be assemblies? Or does it have to be at 7:30 in the morning? Well, so that's one, and then I'll let you answer it serious. The other thing was, I just heard from somebody else the other day, maybe it was Central Bus or something, where she was complaining about a number of times her kids that they go to school has to start 2 hours later at different school districts. But the kids don't be on the bus at the same time, and they're hanging out at school for 2 hours.
Middle school students and Central Bus, likely. Yeah. Your first question, with the assembly piece, we would have to be extremely creative because our auditoriums are unable to hold the entire student body. Currently, they can hold approximately 2 grades.
South Gym can hold everybody.
South Gym can, I'm not certain if North's Gym can. That would be one constraint that we would have at North compared to South. I mean, currently, should there be a grade level assembly, et cetera, generally once the students do arrive, we send staff back to their classrooms to work. Massive scale.
I hear what you're saying, but I have to tell you, from my perspective, getting kids to school at 7:30 in the morning, we're talking about, should they start later in the day in general, getting them to school at 7:30 because the buses work and having cooler jets for an hour.
Well, they had the opportunity coming in late.
If they try their own transportation. So that means that the kids who aren't cool wind up, I hate to say being held prisoner, but they're in supervised pens. I use the word advisedly. I sometimes just don't like that. If it wants to be an activity or something that's organized, fine, but I just don't see bringing students in to sit for an hour. I think it's, for me, disrespectful to the kids,
What do you call study hall?
We didn't have study halls.
I did.
Well, look when you became.
This is recorded. Just want to remind you.
That's fine. They don't know I'm talking to you.
And I think Jason said this, but so the offset of this, one of the trade-offs to having this 1 hour late start once a month is the high school will not have some early dismissal days. So on some of those days on the calendar where you see an early dismissal, that will only be for grades K through 8. The high school students will stay for the full day to make up the minutes that they would be missing with this hour late start, to be able to work that across the year and give teachers sufficient amount of time to meet in collaborative teams.
This is very hard for me it's very hard for me to wrap my head around. 10 days a year, the kids going in late. There's no way to do this at the end of the day. Like, how often in the year are you having faculty meetings at after school?
Faculty meetings are running, there's scheduled once a month, faculty meetings. Department meetings are scheduled once a month. Coordinator meetings once a month.
So is there any way to work that in so that they're doing it at the end of the day, not taking this time away from the kids and upsetting this whole schedule?
I would have to look or make it, but
You are capturing that, yes.
Three weeks out of the 4 in a month, they are doing it after school.
Yes.
They couldn't find the 4th meeting time because of the need to have staff available for parent meetings, for the department meetings, so this late arrival is only to make up the 4th time that they can't find, so the PLC team can meet weekly.
What's the transportation cost?
There is no
There's
transportation.
no
cost.
increase in it.
There's a transport, they're just gonna do it at the right time. Because they're using the buses at the right
Oh, they're
time.
looking at
Yes.
it.
The kids just sit there doing
So
nothing.
then the kids that can't, okay.
That's my problem.
Is, all right, now for my thoughts, go ahead.
So if you know, what's the percentage of the kids that are going to be able to provide their own transportation and come in an hour later, if you know?
Be a difference between north and south. North, I'm just basing off the students who drive. Primarily, most of the seniors drive. South, right, I believe it's mostly juniors and seniors. They have more parking.
But it's also, I mean, and if there are parents that can provide transportation
Right.
or siblings or getting rides in with neighbors, et cetera. So it's hard to predict, you know, how many students will find another ride in if they sleep in and arrive later.
Yeah, because I'm with Jerry. I really don't like the idea of them being penned up, you know, with, of course they have things to do. I mean, we all like extra time in the morning to get things done for the day. But how flexible is this? So if you find it's not working, if you just hate it when it starts, how flexible is this?
We're looking over the next year to make an overall change as well. Potentially changing the amount of periods we have in one day. Right, it's a much bigger endeavor that we're looking down the road. So this is a 1 year, see how this goes.
Right, so we're gonna try
In
it.
the process of looking at
Okay, but what if,
incorporating that remediation and enrichment time as well. That 7:33 to 2:15 day. Currently can't do right now. That would make a dramatic overview to all of our curricular areas.
so my question is, if you begin at the beginning of the year and by winter break, you realize this just isn't working, how flexible is it? Do you have to continue this schedule for the rest of the year? Or
Well, obviously, we're going to communicate the days in advance to families so that they can plan and be prepared for that. So, you know, if it's something that we find is not working and is not successful, I think as administrators, we'll look at that and see what we need to do about changing that. But I also think that we need to give it ample time to see if it works, you know, and we need to, you know, we prioritized as a district that this moving to becoming a PLC is critically important to the success of our students and helping us continue to make sure that all students reach the levels of learning that they need to. In order to do that, teachers need regular time to meet as a collaborative team. And regular time really means at least once a week. Now, our middle school will be once a cycle because they have a 6-day cycle. So it'll be some months 3 times, sometimes it will end up being 4. But at the elementary, we have it as once a week. At the high school with this schedule, they'll be able to meet once a week for a dedicated amount of time to really dig in and do the work they need to do. When you think about, you know, developing assessments, analyzing their instruction and data that they gather from assessments, that's something that takes time to do. And it's something that you need that regularly scheduled time to really make sure that the work you're doing in this collaborative team is going to translate into what you do in your classroom. If you're not meeting frequently enough, then there's no point in doing it because you're not going to be able to really react in real time to student learning because you're waiting until the next time you meet, which if you're not meeting weekly, you're going to pass by where kids are instructionally and what they need. So we want to try it. Again, as Jason said, we're going to really dig into the schedule and think about what we could do, but tackling that for next year to really make a significant change to the schedule was a bit too big of a task to handle right now. So this was our compromise to prioritize for our staff that we're investing this time for you to do this work because we believe it's important. And we're going to dedicate this time for you. And the feedback from the staff was having some at the beginning of the day would be beneficial because there's a lot going on at the end of the day. So if we could have both, that would be advantageous and short of coming in a lot earlier than 7:30 in the morning for staff. This was the way to make it happen.
The other thing that I think deserves to be said is that we aren't breaking ground here. There are schools who do this. There are schools that do it much more frequently than just once a month. They have found success with it. So I'm certainly more optimistic than not.
Anybody we know?
Optimistic. Late arrivals, Westchester has for the past couple of years. Other schools do, I think Colonial School District does as well, I believe, Plymouth Lake Marsh High School. And then there are other districts that choose to do early releases, early dismissals from school, which is not something that we want to do. From a child.
You said Westchester.
Mhm.
Few years, did you guys participate in that?
Mhm.
And then, so specific to Jerry's question, what did you find happened with the students in that first hour on the days that they came in and didn't have questions?
Most of the students found a way to come late.
Let me offer one idea.
And then I'm next.
I got you. I'll offer the challenge. I'll throw down a gauntlet for you, which is there are, it's 10 times a year, there are at least 10 topics that I wish our students knew more about that don't merit a full class and regimen, but there are some things that they need to know about that they don't know about. I know this sounds silly. Some of those things include, by example, personal finance. You know, those are things you're basically, well, that's, but you know what? These are kids who are coming up in a society that know certain things, that there's personal finance. There must be 9 other topics. And so my challenge to you is that, and if you have 10 of them, that's 160 kids in a bucket. You know, it's 160 kids accumulated. And you're right, if 10 people aren't going to be in PLCs. It could be a guest speaker for all I care on each of those topics. But how do you make that a valuable thing that, yeah, the kids could come in late. You know, the kids want to sleep through, they can. But you know what? The other kids go, you know what? This is my opportunity to go see the guy who talks about how to invest, or he's not selling investments. He's talking about how the stock market works and how people do that. Talk about what retirement. There are things kids should know about that they don't know about when we encounter them in the world. How do you sign a lease? What are some of the legal implications of leases and things? How do we make those topics? What are some of the challenges you're going to face when you go to college in terms of integrating? How do I get a series of 10 of those so that when you do it, you know what? You don't have to come in early because it's not required, but there's value in it. And in the course of the year, you check off the 10 boxes because you have value. Then I'm okay, because you know what? Then those are special things to people that are better handled in groups of 160 for an hour. And maybe you sit through twice because you didn't get it the first time. And maybe, finance is a whole bunch different than, but we learned how to write checks,
Or we're even thinking about things that they rush through right now. It was interesting talking to guidance council about Naviance the other day and how they do it. They have to steal time out of an English class to give kids the socialization to that, and there's kids who miss it, they gotta go back and get them. Maybe there's things like that we're doing with them, either rushed or squeezed way, that we can then do some more work. And again, to Jerry's point, maybe it's optional. Or maybe it's not, but that's actually not a bad idea.
Yeah, I agree. That's so concerning to me to have those kids come in for an hour when we all know how precious that time is. And again, I applaud you for finding a way to find that time. I know it's valuable to teachers. But it's just so opposite than to say, come in with nothing to do for an hour. I think it does turn it into the kids with cars and the kids without cars. And especially this age group, what do they want to do in the morning? They want to sleep late. Yeah. They don't want to come in an hour early if they could have another hour of sleep. So while I really appreciate how difficult this is to find this time, I would feel better if that time were used more productively, if we could come up with some way.
I think that's something we can definitely explore. Like what could we do, during that time with, our administration or guidance counselors or support staff to really, bringing in outside people potentially. We could definitely look at that. I think, the reason that we're prioritizing that time for teachers to meet, we want to honor that and keep that sacred, because that's one of the commitments that we're making to teachers. Like, we're not going to take you out of your collaborative team to meet with kids at that time, because that time that you have with your team to do the work you need to do is valuable to your instruction and to student learning. So, we can definitely look at exploring what are possibilities that we can do during that.
And I would say this, if this is the way that we're going to deliver better academic outcomes, yet we're concerned about what those kids are doing, and we're committed to not having teacher involvement in trying to help them through that first hour, and it costs the board another $10,000 a year to figure out how to help you do productive things in those hours. I think this board, I don't speak for, but I'd be interested in hearing about that. So don't let, finances, small finances, create your creativity.
To your point, I'm sorry, I just want to make sure, because Jason mentioned it, and we're going to be coming to the board in the spring with a request to, and this conversation has come up at the board level too, when we've talked about confines of our current high school schedule. Are there other options we can explore? So we are going to ask to engage the services of a scheduling guru out of James Madison University, who is going to work with us and the community to look at our high school schedules, with this being a key component of how we can build this in, as well as looking at what other options we may want out of a high school schedule. So this is, I mean, in fairness, that they're working with a very tight, school day, and trying to find time was next to impossible. So this wasn't anybody's ideal plan, but it was certainly a plan that helped us to get the PLC started, because we know the importance of getting that in and getting that started next year. So the hope is that this is a one-year fix while we look for a more long-term solution that may also change the look of our high school day.
So,
How many PLCs are in high school right now?
We have 2 officially at South, and you have, 8, I believe, yeah, at North. And there's one, a world language PLC that is a teacher, one teacher from North and one teacher from South that are meeting as a PLC.
And within the PLC, how many staff members does that include?
Depends on the subject
So
area.
so it just based on numbers, South as a school doesn't have as much exposure to this as North. This kind of change, all of it, to that staff is going to be way more dramatic than at North, where you have 8 PLCs, and that's been something that's part of the culture of the building. Others are seeing it, that kind of thing.
Well, I don't know that I would agree with that. I think that both of the buildings have been doing different things with their guiding coalitions throughout the year to build knowledge and culture and understanding. So South has actually engaged all of their faculty in playing with this and teaching them some of the, when you think about that cycle and the steps and things that you're doing, like taking time during faculty meetings to teach, like, hey, this is what teams do. Now, between now and the next faculty meeting, they give them some time. I believe now it's all like after school time, or capturing some of like the in-service time that they might have. Try this out with your colleagues. So they've actually grouped their teachers in teams, so they're playing around with some stuff a little bit. North has more teams, and they've got, those teams are providing, feedback and information to their colleagues, because the teams are in multiple subject areas.
Multiple sizes. I think we have
Yes.
some groups that we said are 2 from North and South, or our art group with 2 teachers, but our English 9 group is, I believe, 8 staff members. But again, it's a larger, 400 students taking English 9.
So how many people are in the, so that's what I'm wondering about. You have 8 PLCs of 2 people, and you've got 2 PLCs of 40 people. So how many people are involved in the 2 PLCs inside?
I believe the one has 3 or 4 people, and the other one I think is, I want to say 2 or 3.
They're both very small.
Typically, a professional learning community is, roughly round about 4, 3 to 5 people. It can work with larger groups. It can work with a pair as well. The key is in how that team focuses on working through the cycle, looking at data, that they stay focused on that, and then they really work. Sometimes larger teams, like Jason mentioned, the English 9 team, they may find over time that they need to split into 2 groups. Or occasionally, like, it's better for us to work separately for a little bit and then come back together because they feel like it might be more productive. So in general, most times PLCs are about 3 to 5 people.
So I still have a question. So we hear all the time how the high school buses run at best half full, right? So have you explored at all having some kind of modified schedule with a smaller percentage of buses for that one day a month? Or does that just completely gum up the works? So have you even asked Andy about it?
Yeah,
We did.
all we did was check with Andy about whether or not we could run a delayed opening, and that was problematic.
Okay.
So, right now, the plan is just to run the buses on their current routes, unless we experience something that allows us to consider a change. In other words, students are not taking the buses in or.
Right. Well, we know that that's the case. So did we, did we ask Andy if there was a modified schedule that we could use, or if we're only considering a smaller percentage? Because to Susan's point, most kids find a way to sleep in that morning. But what if we're really only talking about 100 kids, and what does that look like? I don't know.
Still wouldn't know. The difficulty would be you'd have to know where they
Of
were.
course,
They'd have to commit to that.
That goes back to my
And we
question about
bump right up against
flexibility.
the middle school buses.
Okay.
And there may not be any savings as a result of it, because we have to run those buses for the elementaries and the middles anyhow. So in other words, most of those buses are contractually going to be ours, whether they're running or not.
I'm not talking about savings. I'm talking about getting kids to the school later if they want to sleep in.
I got you, I understand. Yeah, that was problematic. Yeah, that we couldn't do.
We had to go to the middle school and shuttle.
Any other questions about high school? So again, just a reminder, this is our focus for next year. So we talk about the 4 questions and focusing on intervention and enrichment, and becoming a PLC is a process, and it takes time to learn how to engage in this kind of work with your colleagues, because you're asking people to really dig into data really deeply in ways with their colleagues that they maybe haven't done before. So our focus next year and priority with the staff, because of really targeting this time for collaboration, is to really provide support and help them feel comfortable with how do you use that time? How do you engage with each other during that time? So it's really a focus on that particular cycle and answering those 4 questions. As far as our next steps, our coordinators, our curriculum coordinators are going to work with their grade level and content leaders to look at adjustments in the curriculum and pacing guides with respect to modifications in minutes at the elementary level. Our principals will work later this spring to determine what the collaborative teams are. It's best to have teams that are like content area, so they'll look at that, or like grade level. We will work with stakeholders to engage in some conversations about folks that are in unique roles. So I'm a singleton in a building. I'm the only German teacher. Who's my PLC? Or folks like our literacy specialists, our math specialists, our counselors, our psychologists, our special ed teachers, who the role they play is unique and different. And in many cases, those are folks who serve as a resource. And so we want to have conversations with them about, okay, so what's it look like for them? Not only what are, at the elementary level, what might they be doing during that intervention block, but when it comes to that intervention, that collaborative time, our literacy specialists, do they have their own PLC? Or are they supporting PLCs and stepping into other grade levels to support? What's the role of a counselor? We have special ed teachers that manage a caseload of students who have different teachers in different subject areas, but then they also teach. At the elementary, they might be teaching particular grade levels. At the secondary level, they might, have a caseload of kids across varying levels, but yet they might also be supporting in a math class or working with language arts or another course. So we have to look at those, and many of those, it's going to be, kind of almost a case-by-case basis with looking at what's the best course of action, what do we do? And again, it will be, we're going to try something, we're going to dip our toe in, we're going to try it, and then get feedback from those folks like, okay, is this working? Do you think something better would be different in the way that you can support student learning and learn yourself as a professional? And again, we're going to continue to really explore the schedule at all 3 levels, get feedback as the year goes on. How's it going? Is it working this way? Do we need to make changes? Let's think through it. So, we have to try something to start. So we're going to try something, we're going to get feedback, see how it goes, and if we need to make changes, we'll make changes and do that. Again, the next steps, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to communicate with other stakeholder groups We're going to work to provide support to our teachers. One of the things that we are going to do to provide support, and in the information that I sent you with the memo, was an agreement with Solution Tree for a hybrid institute. So Solution Tree, who we've worked with some other professional development around professional learning communities for the last, I think 3 years actually, provides what they call a hybrid institute. So they do typical institutes where it's like you go somewhere for a conference. So you fly to Phoenix or you fly to Charlotte, North Carolina or whatever. And the cost of that, so for a regular institute, a typical per teacher cost or per participant cost is usually around $600. And that's just for the registration of the conference. That doesn't count any other expenses. If we are able to bring the institute here in Council Rock, the cost is dramatically less. It's $299 a person. And that's if we only have 90 participants. If we have more than 90 participants, our per person cost goes down with increasing numbers of participants.
Is it possible to engage an organization like that to use our facilities, that they would come up, charge us nothing, we have 40 seats, and they can sell the other 40 or 50 seats to other members of the community, of the other districts? Yeah.
So that is something that we can look at. What we want to do first is make sure we take care of our own people. With this agreement right now, what I sent to you on Friday, the agreement, the way it's written, is an initial deposit of 20%, which is close to $6,000, to hold the dates and secure that they're going to give us the facilitator. They're going to give us, with the Hybrid Institute, we'll have videos of some keynote sessions that then we'll have breakout sessions to talk about with the facilitator that comes to the session with us or to the Institute. So the total cost that's in the agreement is $6,910. That's assuming we only have 90 people at $299 a person. So if we have more than 90 people register for the event, the cost obviously is going to change, and we'll work an addendum with Solution Tree for that difference. But that's the minimum amount that you have to have the agreement to. So that's one of the things, one of the ways that we want to support teachers, by providing some opportunities over the summer for them to start learning and thinking about what they're going to be doing, as well as using our district and service days and repurposing some of our current professional development time that we offer as part of our supervision plan. We have something called focused professional development workshops that we offer teachers throughout the year. So really targeting those to supporting teams as they're working. Like, we're going to offer a workshop on developing a formative assessment. So if you'd like to learn more about that, you can sign up for this workshop. We'll get you a sub for the day, and you can come and work and learn that. So those are some of the ways that we're going to approach support. The Hybrid Institute agreement is something that requires board action. In my memo to you on Friday, I indicated that if it's possible, we could put that on the consent agenda, depending upon the board's feel tonight. Otherwise, we'll put it on the regular board action items. So does anybody have any questions about that agreement in particular?
So if we don't move forward, are we just out the $6,000, or do we?
We haven't paid anything yet. We haven't signed it.
Right. So we signed the agreement, and for whatever reason, we can't get it together. You don't have 90 people, you have 10, whatever the case may be. Are we just out the $6,000, or can we get a refund of our money?
So we have I will tell you that we've already opened up the registration for the event, and we currently have, I believe, 53 people registered. So to your point, Jerry, if we look like we might not be getting enough people, I know some districts that I will definitely reach out to invite them to participate so that we can have the numbers. We also have a clause in this agreement. I worked with Rob Cox on this, knowing the fact that this Hybrid Institute is scheduled for June 21st and 22nd. And our last student day is now June 18th. And our last teacher day is June 19th. So if the winter continues as it is, I worry that we're gonna have a couple more snow days that would bump us into these 2 days. So with that in mind, Rob assisted in adding a clause to the agreement that we can back out of this agreement based on inclement weather
Is it forced to-
on April 23rd, I believe is the date in the agreement, and get a full refund of our $5,000+. Yes,
How many, so we have 50-some teachers who've signed up so far.
so far,
Remind me how many teachers we have in Council Rock?
about 900. About 120 of those people have already gone through training last summer.
So if these 50 people, this is on their time.
Yes, that's correct.
Now, if they choose not to show up, we're out the money.
That would be correct.
I would just tell you that what we used to do at a rescue squad was, when we signed up for training, we put up some money for it. We got it back when we showed up. We didn't show up. Because the problem was, we had lots of people sign up for training who then never showed up. And I'd have the instructor who I paid, who showed up, who trained 3 people instead of 30 people. So that was, they put a personal deposit down. Maybe that's objectionable, but, you know, if they show up, they get it back. It's not, I'm not looking to charge anybody. I just look to protect people that their interest really is true. I have to trust them, but trust would verify.
Well, our teachers participate in conferences continuously.
Yes, they do.
Professional development, so this
Yes.
is not anything out of the ordinary.
No, and it's always been offered by the district and paid for by the district.
I want to be paid for by the district. I just want the reservation. I want people who sign up to really intend to come. I
And I
could get
believe
people to
that
sign up.
you do.
I do too.
Well, and
But-
if you remember from our calendar conversation, the 2 days at the beginning of the spring break that we talked about as exchange days, they can get their exchange days by attending the 2 days of the Institute.
That's fine. And I wish you all the success. I'll be interested if there's anybody who doesn't show up. I'll go out.
So are we okay putting this on the consent agenda?
I am.
Yes.
Yes?
Yeah.
Yes? I know, but yes? Okay, thank
So
you.
it'll come up again under your academic standards you'll present, you know, so we want the items there. We'll just move to include it as an item.
Thank you.
All right, and this just gives you a little bit more about the Institute, and you see the difference in the costs that we talked about. So just ending with, I think this is really important when you think about this process and becoming a PLC and the steps that we need to take together. You know, we've got to do it one step at a time, and I think that as administrators and as we've talked with teachers, and in the presentation that teachers heard at their buildings, you know, we're in this together. We're taking these baby steps together. We're all going to make mistakes. I know I keep saying that to teachers. You're not going to get this right the first time, and that's okay. You're going to fail forward. You're going to get better each time as you're meeting and learn more. And so we want to continue to really focus on, you know, we're taking that next step that we need to take. And it's a baby step, but it's a baby step that's going to help us get to where our end goal is. That's very important for every one of our students in the district. So thank you so much. Any other questions at this time?
Thanks to the principals for
Thank you, everyone.
Yes.
coordinating and working for staying out late with us.
And for all the work that led up to tonight.
Yes, thank you.
Many,
definitely.
many hours. So thank
Yes,
you all. Barry and Sue, thank you.
absolutely.
Thank you, everyone. Is there anything else before concluding this meeting at 9:14 p.m.?
Public comment? No.
Great, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all.